Tyre Nichols was only 29 years old when he was pulled over by Memphis police officers for an alleged traffic stop on January 7th. That traffic stop soon turned violent, and 3 days later, Nichols died. Here's what to know about the Tyre Nichols case as the investigation unfolds. On January 7th, Nichols was stopped for allegedly reckless driving. An officer by the name of Preston Hemphill was identified as one of the initial responding officers, and his body camera footage showed officers immediately began attempting to pull Nichols from the car. As a result, Nichols successfully ran away from the officers, only to be caught later. Once officers had handcuffed Nichols and propped him up against a car, Nichols expressed difficulty breathing. 17 minutes after officers stopped beating Nichols, that ambulance arrives. Nichols is transported to a hospital where on January 10th, he succumbs to his injuries and dies. Memphis's chief of police later said there was no evidence to corroborate the reckless driving allegations.
We can't substantiate the reason for the stop. We know what our officers said. However, there is no video footage, no body camera footage that identifies Mr. Nichols recklessly driving.
The 5 officers directly involved in the beating of Nichols were part of a special unit called the Scorpion Unit, a 50-person unit that policed particular areas of the city, all of which were predominantly black and brown. Those officers were fired on January 15th. On January 26th, all 5 were indicted on 1 charge of second-degree murder, 1 charge of aggravated assault, 2 charges of aggravated kidnapping, 2 charges of official misconduct, and 1 charge of official oppression. On January 30th, MPD announced 2 other officers, including Hemphill, had also been fired. Memphis Fire Department announced 3 officials, including a lieutenant, had also been fired for violating numerous policies and protocols when they responded to the scene. Memphis authorities then released graphic body camera footage of the incident on January 27th. Federal, state, and local authorities had warned that the footage was horrific and appalling, bracing the Memphis community and the country for what they would see. Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's director said he was sickened by the footage, and MPD's chief called the actions of her officers inhumane.
In the video, the initial stop shows the officers already ramped up at about a 10. It takes something to get them amped up, like that. We don't know what happened. So we can't pretend or imagine what happened. All we know is that the amount of force that was applied in this situation was over the top.
Peaceful protests spread around the nation, and MPD announced it was disbanding the Scorpion Unit. The family of Tyre Nichols finally laid their son to rest on February 1st. Nichols' funeral opened with a viewing of his black casket covered with white flowers at the front of the pulpit. 4 musicians playing African drums dressed in all white moved slowly up the aisle of the church pews as they, and those gathered, sang "We Love You, Tyre." Vice President Kamala Harris and the families of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, and others who died at the hands of police brutality also attended Nichols' services in person. The Reverend Al Sharpton delivered his eulogy.
You don't fight gangs by becoming 5 armed men against an unarmed man. That ain't the police, that's punks.
But while the funeral was a celebration of Nichols' life, it was also a call to action. Harris, Sharpton, and Nichols' mother, Ravon Wells, called on Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
Why do we want to see the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed? Because then you have to think twice before you beat Tyre Nichols.
The legislation, which has stalled in Congress, would ban chokeholds and no-knock warrants, end qualified immunity, and prohibit racial and religious profiling by law enforcement officers. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who is representing the Nichols' family, told mourners on Wednesday that Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, who also attended Nichols' funeral, will be reintroducing the bill with an added Tyre Nichols duty to intervene amendment. But Nichols' mother had chilling words for members of Congress as she begged for them to pass the act.
I just need whatever that George Floyd bill, we need it passed.
Yeah.
We need to take some action.
There should be no other child that should suffer the way my son and all the other parents here that have lost their children, Wells said. We need to get that bill passed, or the next child that dies, that blood is going to be on their hands.